I'd like the honor of doing this one because I personally found this hilarious. This is from WNCT9 on your side, provided by agorist Ahab. Is for Wilmington, North Carolina. A $2 million fentanyl drug bust in Wilmington turns out to be 13 pounds of sugar by Associated Press. North Carolina. The new Hanover County Sheriff Office thought it made a huge drug bust, seizing 13 pounds of fentanyl worth $2 million on the street. The powder was found in a home along with other drugs and paraphernalia. A field test indicated it was the powerful opioid, justifying a host of charges against three subjects. Most of those charges soon evaporated when a state lab concluded that whatever the powder was, it wasn't fentanyl. The sheriff's office then sent the powder to a private lab, and the results arrived this week. New Hanover Sheriff Lieutenant Brewer tells WECT-TV that the powder seized in July includes no illicit ingredients and is nothing more than, quote, a combination of simple and complex carbohydrates. In other words, sugar, worth about $8 at the grocery store. There's a further detailed post at the same, WECT provided itself. Testing results by NMS Lab, which came in last week, revealed that the white powder is actually a combination of complex carbohydrates and simples. There were no non-controlled substances mixed in with the 13 pounds of white powder. The false positive result can be traced to a CSI field test using a kit invented and sold by Scott Company Drug Testing to the NHC Sheriff's Office, according to Brewer. It was not user error on the part of the CSI technician because several samples were tested from each bag. The major drug bust of fentanyl in July was billed as one of the largest seizures in the state by Sheriff Ed McMahon. Tell me this is a joke. Sheriff Ed McMahon. After the initial field test came back positive for fentanyl, the sheriff then sent the substance to state lab for confirmatory testing. And that's very quickly when the state lab found out that they couldn't actually identify it, and that's why they then further sent it on for more testing. According to the company's website, Scott Company Drug Testing sells kits only to law enforcement, including tests for cocaine, methamphetamine, MDMA, bath salts, and more. For fentanyl testing, the company's website lists synthetic opiates reagent, which is used to detect the presence of opiates and synthetic opiates, including codeine, heroin, morphine, and fentanyl/oxycodone. Our tests have never been successfully attacked in court, nor has the failure of our product ever been established as the cause of a case to be lost or compromised, the company's website said in a website fact page. So I think to be honest, I can end it there because it goes on a little bit further into the various cases. They have an official press release, but to be quite frank, you can't make those kinds of bold, sweeping claims when your tests can't even distinguish an opiate from sugar. You really can't do that. I thought that was a bit of lighthearted bad news for both the local police force for thinking they had actually caught somebody sinister and serious when in fact they caught somebody who had just finished doing their shopping and got some sweetener for their coffee or some baking powder. Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be possibly anything else. I mean, it's not like any other substances are white in nature. Chalk, surely, for example, isn't white, or sugar, or flour, even. Flour's not white. Flour's not white. Or steam. Yep. I mean, there's so many things that aren't white that could be confused with a severe drug in chemical testing. Oh, we did not. We missed this.
Okay. Let's see. Got the article. I'm not sure who the author of the article is, but this is at sawarimi.org. National prison strike. Men and women incarcerated in prisons across the nation declare a nationwide strike in response to the riot in Lee Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in South Carolina. 7 comrades lost their lives during a senseless uprising that could have been avoided had the prison not been so overcrowded from the greed wrought by mass incarceration and a lack of respect for human life that is embedded in our nation's penal ideology. These men and women are demanding these, yeah, these men and women are demanding humane living conditions, access to rehabilitation, sentencing reform, and the end of modern day slavery. These are the national demands of the men and women in federal, immigration, and state prisons. 1. The immediate improvements to the conditions of prisons and prison policies that recognize the humanity of imprisoned men and women. 2. An immediate end to prison slavery. All persons imprisoned in any place of detention under United States jurisdiction must be paid the prevailing wage in their state or territory for their labor. 3. The Prison Litigation Reform Act must be rescinded, allowing imprisoned humans a proper channel to address grievances and violations of their rights. 4. The Truth in Sentencing Act and the Sentencing Reform Act must be rescinded so that imprisoned humans have a possibility of rehabilitation and parole. No human shall be sentenced to death by incarceration or serve any sentence without the possibility of parole. 5. An immediate end to the racial overcharging, over sentencing, and parole denials of black and brown humans. Black humans shall no longer be denied parole because the victim of the crime was white, which is a particular problem in southern states. 6. An immediate end to racist gang enhancement laws targeting black and brown humans. 7. No imprisoned human shall be denied access to rehabilitation programs at their place of detention because of their label as a violent offender. 8. State prisons must be funded specifically to offer more rehabilitation services. 9. Pell Grants must be reinstated in all U.S. states and territories. 10. The voting rights of all confined citizens serving prison sentences, pretrial detainees, and so-called ex-felons must be counted. Representation is demanded. All voices count. We agree to spread this strike throughout the prisons of America from August 21st to September 9th, 2018. Men and women in prisons across the nation will strike in the following manner. 1. Work strikes. Prisoners will not report to assigned jobs. Each place of detention will determine how long its strike will last. Some of these strikes may translate into a local list of demands designed to improve conditions and reduce harm within the prison. 2. Sit-ins. In certain prisons, men and women will engage in peaceful sit-in protests. 3. Boycotts. All spending should be halted. We ask those outside the walls not to make financial judgments for those inside. Men and women on the inside will inform you if they are participating in this boycott. For hunger strikes, men and women shall refuse to eat. We support the call of Free Alabama Movement campaign to redistribute the pain. 2018, as Bennu Hannibal Ra, son, formerly known as Melvin Ray, has laid out, with the exception of refusing visitation. See these principles described here. How you can help make the nation take a look at our demands, demand action on our demands by contacting your local, state, and federal political representatives with these demands. Ask them where they stand. Spread the strike and word of the strike in every place of detention. Contact a supporting local organization to see how you can be supportive. Be prepared by making contact with people in prison, family members of prisoners, and prisoner support organizations in your state to assist in notifying the public and media on strike conditions. Assist in our announced initiatives to have the votes of people in jail and prison counted in elections. And they have some fundraising links. And they're also listing companies that benefit from prison labor. So those links are in that article there.
All right, so just because this came up in chat, apparently my audio's been off this whole fucking time, because the audio and this isn't something that the chat found out. This is something I found out the hard way. That my audio input device was not active in OBS. So my audio wasn't streaming, and they didn't hear anything from me up until this point. So apologies for that, and I will keep an eye out for that in the future and make sure that my audio levels are good, which is something that honestly sounds like a really rookie mistake. But
it's OBS.
Yeah, because it was like the rest of it loaded properly, and I don't know why my audio input device wouldn't have just worked, but I guess I have to manually toggle that every fucking time now. Anyway, well,
The hard way, that one too. It's not the most friendly of systems, but technical difficulties, we'll work through them.
Yeah.
Strike, I'll be honest, I'm in two minds. I mean, I know a number of the prisoners there put in prison for victimless crimes, which I therefore think aren't actually crimes, but that's a tangential issue. System, whatever it may be, that you voluntarily agreed to, says you will be put in prison for violating someone else's rights. You've already said you're willing to violate other people's rights. Why? What purpose is there for them respecting it and yours? The principle of reciprocity kicks in.
Well,
and it's the one condition where I'm a bit in two minds on this. Because, yeah, I agree. The conditions are fucking horrible there for what they are. But
well,
if you did commit an act of aggression, I don't have a problem with them doing that.
Here's the problem, yo. The problem is that if you're talking about a justice system, and not what, somebody could term a just us system, if you're talking about a system that's supposed to make things, even, make things just, then a system has to be resilient to the concept that they might have wrongly convicted somebody, that they might be protracting somebody's trial, that they might be costing some innocent person's family a whole lot of wages, making their situation fucking god-awful. And, to add to all that, there might just be a loophole that somebody's guilty of. But those are just surface details. The fact is that the legal system has been created around mass imprisonment for the past, century. Because well, actually, probably at this point around 150 years, because fucking the 13th Amendment meant that fucking Lincoln could say that he ended slavery, even though, and I think that was the 13th, if I remember correctly. Lincoln could say that he ended slavery, while also not ending slavery for criminals, where criminals could still be forced to work as payment for a crime. And that's why Jim Crow laws popped up. That's why all these little other laws popped up, like the prohibition in the first place, and specifically prohibition of marijuana. Because all these laws were laws that you could use to put people in prisons and jails because of bullshit, and then force them to work. And so, yeah, maybe if they committed an act of aggression, that'd be one thing. But even then, there's a such thing as serving your time. And the fact that these people are not only slaves in this so-called criminal justice system, instead of being slaves to the fucking people who they actually wronged, that's already atrocious. And so is the idea that they can't serve, and so is the idea that they can't come out and feel represented by the political system anymore because of one or more offenses. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't do that shit, but if you want to talk like reciprocity, the state deserves all the criminal voters it can get because they're criminals and they represent them better.
I agree. I'm not saying the system's just. I'm not claiming that in any way, shape, or form. But the concept of the 13th Amendment itself, the idea that slavery is abolished unless it's a crime, that to me actually does seem to be a fairly compelling punishment.
Well, okay.
You can only become a slave. You can only become a slave if you violate somebody else's rights, and it's basically to learn what it is to have rights.
But to whom should you be a servant? The person who you violated, or the state?
You violated.
Right.
The person you violated, 100%, and not the state.
So the fact is that this wasn't for that. This wasn't for the carriage of justice. This was for the maintenance of the capital class.
I am 100% in agreement with you. This is, as it is a shit system.
Right, so
but
that's why they're striking.
Yes, and that I don't have too much of a problem with the strike from that perspective, because I know what is. But the concept of slave labor force only for people who have committed crimes and only to those they committed crimes against.
Well,
that
okay.
I kind of get.
Sure, but like, okay, so let's look at line item 8. Let's think about prison from a framework of actually preventing recidivism. Number 8 here says state prisons must be funded specifically to offer more rehabilitation services. Well, yes. Yeah, and if you don't want something like that, then you don't actually want this to be a teaching moment at all. And so that's another form that this strike is taking. It's basically saying, don't just treat people like meat. Treat them as humans who can be reformed, or don't cage them in the name of reform.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, mate, on that. Like I said, I don't agree with the system as it stands.
Well, right. But you said you're of two minds with the strike.
From a principle perspective, the idea of, again, as is, I'm for this. But if it wasn't to the extent that it has become today...
Right. So it's less that you're of two minds about the strike, and it's more that you would prefer that the system was something where you wouldn't be sympathizing with prisoners with a strike.
That is probably the best way of putting it as well, because I feel really bad about just unilaterally saying all prisoners don't deserve this, because there are people who don't deserve much sympathy at all for what they have done. And to me, that is something that you must keep in the back of your head with this. I'm not claiming that the state is in their treatment or their methodology or any of this. I'm not claiming that private prisons are a good conceptual system either, because somebody has to fucking fund it.
Yeah. Well, and
To
that's
pay for a victim to pay for their aggressor to be put in a cage seems like an additional punishment to the victim themselves to an extent. How long they're willing to pay for that basically determines the length of punishment. And if they're poor, they can't afford it.
right. Well, and
To me,
also,
prisons themselves seem just wrong. I'm much more a fan of ostracism or a more immediate solution.
well, right. Um, just because that's the thing. I agree with most of these line items, and I'm saying most because there's some things in here that I'm not sure about. Um, like for instance, number 6, an immediate end to racist gang enhancement laws targeting black and brown humans. I would be interested in knowing what they meant by that. So I'll be looking into that a little bit later. But the rest of it seems relatively good, and it seems like 9 is also saying that that essentially they're not allowed to have Pell Grants, which are grants that assist people in the pursuit of a college degree.
Yeah, I
Which to
thought that
me,
was something odd.
well, yeah, and so maybe the Pell Grant isn't available to felons. Maybe they're preventing the people who probably need it most from going into college and learning something on how to better their life. Which, if that's the case, that's fucking atrocious. If you're gonna throw money at anybody, throw money at them. It'll prevent the system from being worse and probably improve communities.
I agree with that. The concept of rehabilitation is important, and I think for acts of aggression, to be quite frank, the only way you can learn what it means to respect rights is to lose them for a bit and then get them back and see how much better it is for you that way.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
For
So
non-violent crime, I wholeheartedly agree with what these people are doing. For anything that has no victim,
yeah,
you should be striking for for everything, mate.
for
You should be
especially
striking
for
for
an
your freedom back.
abolishment of those victimless crime laws. Like, to me, the fact that they're not pushing for an end to prohibition is already kind of bad. But fucking whatever. I'm not a prisoner. I'm not in their situation. Um. So now that people can actually fucking hear me, which apologies again, because fucking there was a bunch of dead air at the beginning. Um, First off, just because you didn't hear this, and I do need to say it, this is brought to you by Brave, the ad-resistant, tracker-resistant browsing experience. You can go to brave.com/bad944 to support creators directly instead of through advertisers. Um, and it's also brought to you by our patrons at Patreon when we get some. Where you can go patreon.com/badmorningnews and get access to an exclusive channel in our Discord, and also get access to the patron-only posts and hangouts that we're going to be doing. So consider doing that. There's going to be plenty of stuff that we're going to be doing, and we're open to suggestions for patron rewards, so let us know what you want and how you want it. Anyway, also, by the way, we have a new host for those of you who weren't here for the community episode. Sorry, for the episodes this week, but were here for the community episode last week. Cryptic-Cynic. You can find him on Twitter, Cryptic_Cynic. So fucking, now that that's out of the way, I'm going to read this article from Bloomberg Quint on Google and MasterCard. And this article is Google and MasterCard cut a secret ad deal to track retail sales. Let me make sure this is in OBS. Yeah. This is by Mark Bergen and Jenny Serrane. I'm pretty sure that's how you would pronounce that. Maybe Serrane. I don't know. Whatever. Bloomberg. For the past year, select Google advertisers have had access to a potent new tool to track whether the ads they ran online led to a sale at a physical store in U.S. That insight came thanks in part to a stockpile of MasterCard transactions that Google paid for. But most of the 2 billion MasterCard holders aren't aware of this behind-the-scenes tracking. That's because the companies never told the public about the arrangement. Alphabet Incorporated's Google and MasterCard Incorporated brokered a business partnership during about 4 years of negotiations, according to 4 people with knowledge of the deal, 3 of whom worked on it directly. The alliance gave Google an unprecedented asset for measuring retail spending, part of the search giant's strategy to fortify its primary business against onslaughts from Amazon.com, Incorporated, and others. But the deal, which has not been previously reported, could raise broader privacy concerns about how much consumer data technology companies like Google quietly absorb. Quote, people don't expect what they buy physically in a store to be linked to what they're buying online, end quote, said Christine Bannon, counsel with the advocacy group Electronic Privacy Information Center, EPIC. Fucking, of course it is. There's just far too much burden that companies place on consumers and not enough responsibility being taken by companies to inform users what they're doing and what rights they have. Google paid MasterCard millions of dollars for the data, according to 2 people who worked on the deal, and the companies discussed sharing a portion of the ad revenue, according to one of the people. The people asked not to be identified, discussing private matters. A spokeswoman for Google said there is no revenue sharing agreement with its partners. A Google spokeswoman declined to comment on the partnership with MasterCard, but addressed the ads tool. Before we launched this beta product this year, we built a new double-blind encryption technology, this is quotes, that prevents both Google and our partners from viewing our respective encryption technology that prevents both Google and our partners from viewing our respective users' personally identifiable information, the company said in a statement. We do not have access to any personal information from our partners' credit and debit cards, nor do we share any personal information with our partners. The company said people can opt out of ad tracking using Google's Web and App Activity online console. Inside Google, multiple people raised objections, though the service did not have a more obvious way for cardholders to opt out of the tracking, one of the people said. Seth Eisen, a MasterCard spokesperson, I automatically PC-ified that, spokesman, also declined to comment specifically on Google, but he said MasterCard shares transaction trends with merchants and their service providers to help them measure, quote, the effectiveness of their advertising campaigns. The information, which includes sales volumes and an average size of the purchase, is shared only with permission of the merchants, Eisen added. No individual transaction or personal data is provided, he said in a statement. We do not provide insights that track, serve up ads to, or even measure ad effectiveness relating to individual consumers. Last year, when Google announced the service, fucking no space there for some reason. Hey, Bloomberg, if you're editing or hiring an editor, hit me up. Called Store Sales Measurement, the company just said that it had access to, quote, approximately 70% of U.S. credit and debit cards through partners without naming them. That 70% could mean the company has deals with other credit card companies totaling 70% of the people who use credit and debit cards. Or it could mean that the company has deals with companies that include all credit card users, and 70% of those are logged into Google accounts like Gmail when they click on a Google search ad. Anyway, it goes into some detail. I would recommend anybody research that. But 70% yo. 70% of U.S. credit and debit cards through partners. And they also will buy your transactions and link them to your account. So if you've ever wondered one of the reasons why you seem to be getting a whole lot of ads for fucking products that you bought in a store, that's why, among other reasons. I think Walmart does this too.
Well, to be fair, this is just an extension of a process called onboarding. MasterCard does this. I'm sure. I know most insurance companies do this. This is not basically. I'll be quite frank. This is not that big a news story from my perspective, simply because it's been done for decades. The fact that it's a secret deal between MasterCard and Google, or it's not publicly announced, just means that MasterCard wasn't willing to share the fact with that they were utilizing data that they had basically the right to, under terms and conditions, to utilize in the way that they have. People, they don't want to rock the boat, so they didn't tell anybody because they didn't have to tell anybody in the States. Now, if they tried to do that shit over here, you'd have to tell somebody. You'd have to tell every single user that you're going to do this to. And they may be treading a very thin line.
Well, and let me be clear.
Various rules.
I don't think this is unethical. I actually, I don't think this is unethical, but what I do think is that it really, bears out the don't put any information out there that you wouldn't want the entire world to have mentality. It bears out the security mentality.
Precisely.
And realistically speaking, it really highlights the fact that you can't just trust companies because they're companies.
Let's be fair. These people do have a record of your purchases. So if you go out and buy a shit ton of sex toys or something, they know.
Mm-hmm.
They know.
Well, and
Google knows too.
And Google knows because of what they already did with Gmail, which most people have their accounts associated with the Gmail account, their purchase accounts. So if you buy a fucking dildo on Amazon, they know about it.
A bit amusing, that, but it's not just that sort of thing. It's also your insurance status, your monetary status. I mean, think about an insurance form. If you file out for car insurance or something on one of these big websites like Compare the Market or MoneySupermarket.com, what you're basically doing is giving them a shit ton of data to validate whether or not you qualify for a loan or an insurance policy or whatever.
Right.
You're giving them all the same data that loads of companies would love to know about you, your affluence, your ability to pay whatever your product you're looking to buy for. And those sorts of metrics are unbelievably valuable to the advertising community because it means that they can weed out everybody that can't afford the product in the first place.
Right.
So they don't have to worry about somebody not paying for whatever's coming or selling advertising that won't make a sale because it can't. It's very good information because it improves the efficiency of the advertising and it keeps you from seeing ads for things that you really wish you could have. You just can't. You can't afford that kind of thing.
Well, and of course, and this is the primary thing, Google will read your information, and they'll serve you ads based on that information right in Gmail, unless you have an ad blocker enabled. And getbrave.com/bad944. And this is valuable to remember because this is why you can click the links in a Google Gmail header, the subject line, and confirm your email address or view a coupon or something similar to that, reply, and it'll tell you when an email was sent and encourage you to reply to it. Because the more they do this sort of stuff, the better they can advertise to people. So
it's a situation, to be honest, but I mean, as I said, I've got no problem with it, but people do need to be aware that whatever they buy, you bought that. Not just the sales clerk, not just the people who own the company, but also who facilitated the transaction. So unless you're buying everything in cash, somebody else knows.
Right. And you know, speaking of that, just to wrap this particular story up, Google has approached other payment companies about the program. This is back in that Bloomberg article. According to two people familiar with the conversations, but it is not clear if they finalized similar deals. The people asked to not be identified because they were not authorized to speak about the matter. Google confirmed that the service only applies to people who are logged into one of its accounts and have not opted out of ad tracking. Purchases made on MasterCard branded cards accounted for around a quarter of U.S. volumes last year, according to the Nielsen report, a financial research firm. Through this test program, Google can anonymously match these existing user profiles to purchases made in physical stores. The result is powerful. Google knows that people clicked on ads and can now tell advertisers that this activity led to actual store sales. Google is testing the data service with a small group of advertisers in the U.S. in massive mini quotes here. It's fucking small group. Let me just highlight that a few times. According to a spokeswoman, with it, marketers see aggregate sales figures and estimates of how many they can attribute to Google Ads, but they don't see a shopper's personal information, how much they spend, or what exactly they buy. The tests are only available for retailers, not the companies that make the items sold inside stores, the spokeswoman said. The service only applies to its search and shopping ads, it said. I mean, maybe. Maybe. I mean, maybe. Really, maybe. But that's the information we have for now. All these programs normally just, like, there's some information that comes out later, and they're like, oh, yeah. You know that, too? So, I'm waiting for that, oh, yeah. You know, that one, too, to come out. Because I think that, oh, yeah, that one, too, is gonna come out. Absolutely. Like, I see very little reason to think it won't. But with that being said, we are pretty much done with the community links. So let's get to the link that you wanted to cover about the fucking organ. The organic
orgonite. Yeah, I'd never really heard of this product really before, but apparently it's been around since the 50s at least. There's this product called orgonite. Now, I don't know much about it. I haven't done enough research on it, and the man who discovered it and created it called it orgone was discredited, put in prison, all sorts of stuff for refusing to stop using this product. Making all sorts of claims about it. They were very what's the right word? Well, very wide-ranging. They were quite amazing sorts of claims, perhaps too good to believe, because these were supposedly curing people of cancer and all sorts of things. Down to something that's now called scalar energy and scalar energy devices. Now, I only bring this up because I was on YouTube and somebody mentioned that the government is cracking down on these devices. Yeah. Doing it via Etsy. And so I had to look this up, and I found the incident. So I'm going to skip a little bit in because it talks about the discoverer Wilhelm Reich, who created this product, came up with a treatment chamber that you'd put people in, they'd come out, and they claimed to feel better. Whether or not it was all psychosomatic, I'm not certain. A few people have said that they have actually managed to replicate his experiments and get the same results, which means reproducibility. That's a big thing in science. So maybe it's valid, maybe it's not. I have no idea. Its methodology is very up in the air. Even Einstein said so. So it's a little bit for me. But the actual story here seems a bit more interesting. Flash forward to 2018. From 1957. And it seems that government agencies are still trying to suppress technologies that can have healing benefits. I started making scalar energy devices. This is off of a website called Woo Woo Woman. It's her product. After trying them out in my home, completely curing my insomnia, which was caused by Wi-Fi and my sensitivity to EMF. Excited by the prospect of a product that can look good in your home and also possibly have healing effects, I set about creating and love making these pieces. I make no claims about my products other than reporting what myself and others have experienced in using them, testing them and recording data, and also referring to scientific studies conducted by experts. I don't say that they can cure anything because I don't know if they can. What I do know is that I feel much healthier and sleep much better having them around. And she goes on again to put stuff through the links, a bit of self-advertising, and then she makes a comment that I was shocked to open an email from Etsy the other day informing that some of my items in my shop had been deactivated. The reason given was these items were removed in accordance with the notice that we received from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as well as Etsy's prohibited items policy. Etsy prohibits items that present an unreasonable risk of harm or that violate safety regulations. This includes, but is not limited to, radioactive items and nuclear materials. What? Pyramids made of nothing but resin, metal, and crystals were getting lumped in with nuclear and radioactive materials. Etsy provided me a list of prohibited items, and my pyramids did not seem to fit. And she goes on to list them. There isn't actually anything that does mention, it says dangerous items, hazardous materials, recalled items, and weapons, but there's not much information with regards to how these are radioactive. And she sent a request and was told by the Etsy representative, quote, recently, Etsy was contacted by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission requesting the removal of items presented as being made from or containing nuclear radioactive materials, as well as items presented with qualities associated with nuclear or radioactive materials. Examples include negative ion energy items, scalar energy items, and EMF protection items. If I'm not mistaken, you're an EMF protection item, correct?
Well, yeah, probably.
Strictly speaking, something that would block all electromagnetic frequencies is, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, something which can be regulated as a radioactive material, even if it isn't made of radioactive materials.
Huh. Interesting.
This is a very interesting step forward in the definition of what is radioactivity, I think, to claim that electromagnetic frequencies fall under the same categories as standard radiation. And it does seem concerning that anything which could block such radiation would then be blocked from public ownership. It's something as innocuous as basically a bit of resin and stone made into the shape of usually a pyramid.
That's
Right.
pretty crazy. I actually met this lady once who had one of those, and she brought one in to show people. And yeah, it's just this little pyramid that looks like it's metallic. You know, it's kind of silver, but according to her, she believes that it helps deflect Wi-Fi and other EMF signals, and she's big on that idea of that bombardment from EMF and Wi-Fi and those types of things affect your sleep and your health, and so she definitely felt that it helped her by having that in her house. So it's I wonder if I know that that woman who owns that site, because I wonder if that's the same person. That'd be pretty interesting. But yeah, it's crazy to think now that apparently that's illegal. This, like you said, it's just this lump of nothing, and the idea that that's now some kind of banned item or whatever is pretty ridiculous.
Agreed.
I'm looking at the picture that's associated with it at the bottom of the page. The listings, basically. I mean, They actually look really quite pretty. I think even if they do absolutely bugger all, I think they do at least look nice. They look as like like a nice paperweight to have at the bare minimum. So to ban this for being radioactive, I mean, come on.
Well, I
It's not
mean,
like the woman's using uranium in the damn thing.
yeah, and I mean, fucking, if anything, this is just fucking retro wave as fuck, if you look at it. Like,
Oh, I mean,
fucking vaporwave. Look at this fucking. You listen to this while listening to some music designed to sound like Macintosh.
I know it's. Oh man, I mean, I've never been a big fan of the New Age philosophies and things like that. Maybe they do have some validity to them. I have no idea. I haven't researched them properly. I don't even know if they've researched themselves properly. But I still think that to just blanket ban them indicates that, if anything, there might actually be something to this stuff.
Well, maybe. I mean,
Streisand effect. It's the Streisand effect, just in more of an interesting way.
right. Well, maybe. Well, and of course, like fucking, if these do block radiation, then I guess she was right. I mean, not necessarily because of the new age bullshit. There's probably some way to refine it that doesn't look like this, but um, if they're claiming that this does block radiation, then they're claiming that her products work. So realistically, all she needs to do is find another store than Etsy, sell them herself until she gets sued by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission for fucking selling hunks of things.
And if this does actually benefit people in some way, shape, or form, or even if it's a placebo, I have no idea. But if it does, for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to come in, basically say, no, you can't sell that product because we don't want you to. We think it's dangerous. Just, it smacks a big brother to me. It really does.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we have one comment, probably related directly to the fucking fact that my mic didn't work. Finian says, well, two comments technically. And apologies for that again, by the way. I can't apologize enough. I should have checked my audio levels. I didn't. That's on me. Finian says, if they're non-violent criminals, they shouldn't be in prison in the first place, though, and most violent criminals should be dead. Remove violent predators from society. Prison in general, as Lupinit said, is a horrible idea in general. Yes, and also, of course, not just society you're removing them from, but the gene pool. And if there are any sort of nascent, sort of built-in factors that are hereditary that you can prevent in terms of being one of the dark triad personalities, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. I mean, it would prevent people like me if that online test was right, but I'd have to see fucking an actual psychological profile done on me in order to figure that out, because I'm not going to trust some online test to tell me I'm a narcissistic Machiavellian psychopath. Especially since the test had 1 page of questions, which that's kind of dumb to begin with, but everybody trusts it because I think the site's a .edu. Fucking someday we should take some time on the Bad Morning Cast to just take that test publicly. What do y'all say? You would you be willing to do that, Cynic and Lupinit?
Yeah, I'm in. Why not?
About you, Lupinit? Couldn't hear you.
Why not?
So, how about this? Something might be coming up this next week, but this next Monday, let's work in some time near the end of the show just to fucking take the online Dark Triad test and see our results in real time. And I'll take it again just so that people can see it. Anyway. Anyway.
Taking a soft one of it, I didn't really turn up very dark.
Well, yeah. Of course, like, to be honest, you're not very dark, which is why fucking you and I butt heads occasionally, because, like, I'm talking about Rivers of Blood and Years of Darkness, and you're like, well, I mean, maybe you could just get a different app?
Yeah, it's true. I always look for a more peaceful solution in the end.
All right. So, I think that relatively well wraps it up. This is the latest community episode of Bad Morning News. Government is stealing your sugar, claiming it's fentanyl. Fucking, it's imprisoning you and then forcing you into slave labor. Fucking, it's taking your magic rocks because they're fucking nuclear materials, and it's taking your fucking MasterCard data to make sure you're buying shit. So, just remember, this is the world we live in. Remember that they own you in their minds, and remember that there are countless ways to break out. So smash the state, fuck the system. Bad morning to everyone out there.
Bad morning, everybody.
Have a good weekend, everybody.